I will never forget the sound of my daughter's screams. They pierced through the quiet afternoon like shattered glass, yanking me from my kitchen where I'd been preparing dinner. I dropped everything and ran outside, my heart pounding against my rib cage. What I saw on our sidewalk will haunt me for the rest of my life. My sweet Lily, my 14-year-old daughter who had never hurt anyone, was sprawled on the concrete, her hands clutching her face as blood spilled between her fingers. Standing over her was Patricia Wilson, the self-appointed Homeowners Association watchdog everyone called Karen behind her back. Her face was contorted with rage, finger pointing down at my sobbing child. "You do not belong to us," she screamed, spittle flying from her mouth. "How many times do I have to tell you? You are bringing down property values. You are not welcome here." I fell to my knees beside Lily, pulling her into my arms as she sobbed. Through her bloodied fingers, I could see the horrifying gap where her 2 front teeth had been. Neighbors began emerging from their homes, frozen in disbelief at the scene unfolding on our quiet cul-de-sac. I heard someone say they were calling 911. Mrs. Abernathy from across the street was already on her phone, her hand shaking as she described what she'd witnessed. But all I could focus on was my daughter's pain and the woman still ranting above us, completely unrepentant about what she had done. We had moved to Oakridge Estates just 4 months ago, thinking it would be the perfect fresh start for our family. After my husband passed away last year, Lily and I needed a change, somewhere quiet, peaceful, with good schools that had strong support for children with special needs. Lily has Down syndrome, and while she's high-functioning and incredibly independent for her age, she still benefits from specialized education programs. The neighborhood seemed perfect: single-level homes with minimal stairs for Lily's occasional balance issues, sidewalks throughout for her daily walks, and close proximity to her new school. Before choosing Oakridge Estates, I had done extensive research. I spent hours online reading about the school district's special education programs, visiting various neighborhoods to assess their accessibility, and even meeting with the special education coordinator at the local middle school. When I found the modest 3-bedroom home on Maple Lane with its gently sloping entryway and proximity to the community center, it felt like fate. The previous owners had already installed grab bars in the bathroom, a feature that would benefit Lily on her more challenging days. The backyard was small but enclosed, perfect for Lily to enjoy safely. I envisioned her planting the garden she had always wanted, but couldn't have at our previous apartment. The selling real estate agent had mentioned something about a homeowners association, explaining it mostly dealt with maintaining common areas and ensuring property values stayed high. I remembered signing a thick packet of covenants and restrictions, though truthfully I had only skimmed the dense legal language, focusing instead on the sections about exterior modifications, in case we needed to add more accessibility features later. Nothing had raised red flags, and the monthly fee seemed reasonable for the well-maintained sidewalks and community park. No one warned me about Patricia Wilson or her self-appointed role as neighborhood gatekeeper. The first 2 weeks had been wonderful. Our neighbors on either side brought welcome baskets and introduced themselves warmly. Lily made friends with the Johnson kids next door who invited her to join their afternoon basketball games in the driveway. Even though she couldn't always keep up, they were patient and kind, adjusting their play to include her. I remember thinking how lucky we were to have found such an accepting community. Then the notes started appearing on our door. The first one was about our garden gnomes. Apparently, tacky lawn ornaments were against Homeowners Association regulations. I removed them without complaint, wanting to be a good neighbor. Then came comments about the ramp I'd installed at our front door for the occasional days when Lily's balance was particularly troublesome. Unsightly modifications must be approved by the architectural committee, the note read. I filled out the proper paperwork and continued to hope for the best. But the notes kept coming, becoming increasingly pointed. Special needs accommodations that diminish neighborhood aesthetic standards require special exemptions. At first, I didn't know who was leaving them. Then one afternoon I happened to glance out the window just as Patricia Wilson was slipping another note into our mailbox. That's when the whispers from other neighbors began to make sense. Patricia had appointed herself the unofficial Homeowners Association enforcer years ago. She had no actual authority but wielded influence through intimidation and persistent complaints. Most residents simply complied with her demands for an easy life. I tried to follow suit, hoping the harassment would eventually stop if we followed all the supposed rules. Instead, things escalated. Patricia began attending every homeowners association meeting armed with a list of complaints about our property. She questioned whether Lily's occasional singing in the yard constituted a noise violation. She suggested that the bright yellow paint on Lily's bedroom window frames, which I'd added to help my daughter identify her own room more easily, was garish and property value diminishing. When I calmly explained the purpose behind these accommodations, several board members nodded sympathetically. But they still issued us a warning about the window frames, requesting we repaint them a more suitable neutral tone within 30 days. The situation truly began to deteriorate the day Patricia blocked Lily's path home from the school bus. My daughter typically walked the short distance from the neighborhood bus stop to our house alone, an independence she cherished and that her occupational therapist had encouraged. I usually watched discreetly from our front window, giving her the dignity of appearing to manage on her own, while ensuring she was safe. That afternoon I saw Patricia step directly into Lily's path, arms crossed, refusing to move. Even from a distance I could see my daughter's confusion and growing distress as the woman lectured her. Lily had been having such a good day too. Her special education teacher had emailed me during lunch to share that Lily had volunteered to read aloud in social studies class, a massive step forward for my sometimes shy daughter. She had been clutching her favorite blue folder with the dolphin stickers, a small achievement award peeking out from inside that she was undoubtedly eager to show me. I had prepared her favorite apple slices with peanut butter as an after-school snack, planning to celebrate her classroom bravery. But as Patricia's confrontation continued, I watched my daughter's shoulders slump forward, her chin tucking down in that telltale way that signaled her retreating into herself. The folder was clutched tightly against her chest now, like a shield. Even from my vantage point, I could see her beginning to rock slightly, a self-soothing behavior she typically only displayed when overwhelmed. The pride and excitement that should have accompanied her homecoming was evaporating with each second that Patricia towered over her, wagging her finger and gesturing toward our house with obvious disdain. I was out the door in seconds, furious and protective. As I approached, I heard Patricia telling my daughter that common areas in the homeowners association are not appropriate places for disruptive individuals, and that the homeowners association space begins at the sidewalk. When she saw me coming, she quickly shifted her tone, claiming she was just expressing concern about Lily walking alone, but the damage was done. For days afterward, my confident, independent daughter begged me to meet her at the bus stop, suddenly afraid to walk home alone. After that incident, I filed a formal complaint with the Homeowners Association Board, documenting Patricia's harassment and requesting intervention. The board president assured me they would speak with her, but nothing changed. If anything, her behavior grew more brazen, as though our complaint had only fueled her determination to drive us out. Other neighbors began to distance themselves, not out of malice toward us, I think, but out of fear of becoming Patricia's next target. Even the Johnson kids stopped inviting Lily to play basketball, their mother apologetically explaining that Patricia had been making comments about her children associating with that challenged girl. Then came that terrible Wednesday afternoon in May. Lily had been learning about kindness in her social skills class at school and had decided to put those lessons into practice. She'd spent her allowance on a small potted chrysanthemum for Mrs. Abernathy, who had recently complimented Lily's school art project when she'd seen it through our window. Lily was so proud of her plan to spread kindness, carefully rehearsing what she would say when presenting the flower. I watched from the porch as she walked confidently across the cul-de-sac, flower pot clutched carefully in both hands. She never made it to Mrs. Abernathy's door. Patricia emerged from her house like a storm cloud, intercepting my daughter on the sidewalk. I started moving immediately, sensing trouble, but I was too far away to prevent what happened next. Patricia began gesturing wildly, her voice growing louder with each word. I could hear her demanding to know what Lily was doing, wandering around the neighborhood unsupervised. My daughter, confused and increasingly frightened, tried to step around Patricia to continue her mission, but the woman moved to block her path once more. What happened next occurred so quickly that several witnesses later gave slightly different accounts, but security camera footage from the Johnsons' house would later confirm the terrible truth. As Lily attempted to step around Patricia for the second time, the woman placed both hands on my daughter's shoulders and shoved her, hard. Caught completely off guard, Lily fell backward, the flower pot flying from her hands. She couldn't catch herself in time and hit the pavement face first, her front teeth shattering on impact. The sound of the pot breaking was immediately followed by my daughter's scream of pain. As I sprinted across the street, Patricia stood over my injured child, shouting those words that will forever echo in my nightmares. "You do not belong to us. When will you understand that? You do not belong here." By the time I reached Lily, neighbors had begun to emerge from their homes, drawn by the commotion. Mrs. Abernathy was already calling for an ambulance. Mr. Johnson, retired military with first aid training, knelt beside us offering help. And importantly, Mrs. Perez from the corner house had her phone out, recording Patricia's continued tirade even as my daughter bled on the sidewalk. That video would prove invaluable in the days to come. The police arrived before the ambulance, responding to multiple 911 calls about an assault on a disabled minor. Officer Reynolds took one look at the scene, my bloodied daughter, the shattered pot with flowers strewn across the sidewalk, Patricia still ranting about property values and homeowners association regulations, and immediately separated Patricia from the crowd, placing her in the back of his patrol car while his partner took statements. The ambulance arrived minutes later, the paramedics gentle and efficient as they assessed Lily's injuries, confirming what I already feared. Her two front teeth were completely knocked out, and a third was badly chipped. As I prepared to accompany Lily to the hospital, my neighbor Mrs. Abernathy pressed a business card into my hand. "My son-in-law is the best attorney in the county," she whispered. "Call him tonight. What happened here wasn't just assault, it was a hate crime against a disabled person. We all heard what she said." I nodded numbly, tucking the card into my pocket as I climbed into the ambulance beside my daughter. The next 48 hours passed in a blur. The emergency dentist confirmed that Lily's dental injuries were severe but treatable, though the full reconstruction would require multiple procedures over several months and cost thousands of dollars our insurance would only partially cover. More devastating was my daughter's emotional state. She kept asking what she had done wrong, why Mrs. Patricia hated her so much, and if we needed to move away again. My heart broke every time she asked these questions, unable to explain the kind of prejudice and cruelty that would lead someone to harm a child simply for being different. Meanwhile, Mrs. Perez's video had found its way online, sparking outrage far beyond our community. Local news stations ran the story, and disability rights advocates began reaching out to offer support. The video had captured everything: Patricia's unprovoked aggression, her hateful words, and most damning of all, the moment she physically pushed my disabled daughter to the ground. By midnight, the clip had been viewed over 200,000 times, with hundreds of comments expressing outrage and calls for justice. By morning, the number had tripled, and local television stations were parked at the entrance to our neighborhood. A reporter from Channel 7 caught Patricia attempting to leave her house with a packed suitcase the following day. The footage of her hurrying to her car, face partially covered by large sunglasses, while refusing to answer questions about assaulting a disabled child, only fueled the growing public indignation. When she discovered that police had stationed an officer outside her house specifically to prevent her from fleeing before formal charges could be filed, her ensuing tirade was captured live on the evening news. The Homeowners Association Board, suddenly finding themselves under intense scrutiny, issued an emergency statement distancing themselves from Patricia's actions, claiming she had never been an authorized representative of the Homeowners Association, despite her long history of acting as their enforcement arm. They convened an emergency meeting, to which I received a formal invitation along with profuse apologies for the unfortunate incident. Board members who had previously ignored my complaints suddenly found time to visit us in the hospital, expressing shock and dismay at Patricia's behavior, bringing flowers and stuffed animals for Lily that she accepted with quiet confusion. When we returned home, a group of neighbors had organized a welcome back gathering, with handmade cards for Lily and promises of support through whatever came next. It seemed Patricia's actions had finally pushed the community to take a stand against the bullying they had tolerated for too long. The Johnsons apologized tearfully for withdrawing their children's friendship from Lily, explaining they had been intimidated by Patricia's threats to report various supposed violations on their property if they continued to encourage the disabled girl's inappropriate behaviors. By that point, I had indeed contacted Mrs. Abernathy's son-in-law, attorney Michael Brennan, who specialized in disability rights cases. After reviewing the evidence, the video, witness statements, our documented history of harassment, and the Homeowners Association's failure to intervene despite formal complaints, he agreed to represent us in both criminal and civil proceedings. Patricia had been charged with assault, but Michael pushed the district attorney to add hate crime enhancements based on her clearly documented statements targeting Lily's disability. The Homeowners Association quickly became entangled in the legal proceedings as well. Michael filed a separate civil suit against them for negligence and failure to prevent discrimination, citing their years of allowing Patricia to operate as their de facto enforcement officer without restraint. Faced with potential liability, the Homeowners Association board attempted to settle quietly, offering to cover Lily's medical expenses in exchange for our silence. Michael advised us to decline, believing we had an opportunity to create meaningful change beyond just our situation. 3 months after the assault, we found ourselves in court for Patricia's criminal trial. Lily was nervous but determined to attend, saying she wanted the judge to see her face and understand what had happened. She sat beside me in the courtroom, shoulders back, her temporary dental prosthetic in place until permanent implants could be installed. The prosecution presented a devastating case, including the video, medical documentation of Lily's injuries, and testimony from multiple neighbors about Patricia's history of targeting my daughter specifically for her disability. Patricia's defense attempted to portray the incident as a momentary lapse in judgment rather than a pattern of discriminatory behavior. But this strategy collapsed under cross-examination. When confronted with the documented history of harassment and her own recorded words, Patricia grew increasingly defensive and combative on the stand, eventually revealing her true sentiments by stating that special needs people lower property value, and that the Homeowners Association should have bylaws preventing them from moving in altogether. The courtroom fell silent at these words, the judge's expression darkening visibly. In his verdict, Judge Morales was unequivocal. He found Patricia guilty on all charges, including the hate crime enhancements. During sentencing, he spoke directly to her about the particular cruelty of targeting a vulnerable child for harassment and ultimately violence, merely for existing in a space where she had every right to be. He sentenced her to 18 months in state prison, 3 years of probation following release, mandatory sensitivity training, and a restraining order preventing her from coming within 500 feet of Lily or our home upon her eventual release. More importantly for Lily's recovery, Judge Morales ordered Patricia to pay restitution, covering the full cost of her dental reconstruction, therapy, and additional compensation for pain and suffering. In his closing statements, he addressed my daughter directly, apologizing that the legal system hadn't protected her sooner, and assuring her that she absolutely did belong in her home and community, that it was Patricia who had failed to understand the true meaning of community and belonging. Our civil case against the Homeowners Association concluded shortly thereafter with a substantial settlement. Under the terms of the agreement, the Homeowners Association was required to implement comprehensive anti-discrimination training for all board members, establish clear procedures for handling harassment complaints, and contribute to a newly established neighborhood inclusion fund. This fund would be used to make the community more accessible and welcoming for residents of all abilities, starting with the construction of an inclusive playground at the neighborhood park. In what seemed like poetic justice, the perfect location for this playground turned out to be the green space directly behind Patricia's former home, which had been sold to cover her legal expenses. The new owners, a lovely couple with twin boys on the autism spectrum, were enthusiastic supporters of the project. As summer turned to fall, construction began on a playground specifically designed to accommodate children of all abilities, with sensory-friendly equipment, accessible swings, and surfaces navigable by wheelchairs and walkers. On the day the playground was completed, the Homeowners Association organized a community ribbon-cutting ceremony. The entire neighborhood turned out for the event, along with local media and representatives from several disability advocacy organizations that had supported us through the ordeal. Even Lily's entire special education class came on a school bus, their excited chatter filling the autumn air as they admired the colorful equipment designed with children like them in mind. The new playground was truly magnificent, not just accessible but actively inclusive in its design. There were sensory panels with different textures for children with processing sensitivities, musical elements that could be enjoyed from a wheelchair, swings with supportive seats alongside traditional ones, and ramps integrated throughout so seamlessly they seemed like natural elements of the playscape rather than accommodations. A beautiful mosaic near the entrance, created by local artists including several with disabilities, spelled out "Everyone Belongs" in vibrant tiles. They asked Lily if she would do the honors of the official opening. My daughter, now sporting her permanent dental implants and a confidence I feared the attack might have permanently damaged, stood before our neighbors, with scissors in hand. She wore her favorite yellow dress for the occasion, her hair adorned with the butterfly clips her father had given her before he passed. The president of the Homeowners Association, who had been replaced in an emergency election following our lawsuit, handed my daughter the microphone, bending down slightly to show her which button to press. "This playground is for everyone," Lily said simply, her newly restored smile radiant. "Because everyone belongs here." And with those words she cut the ribbon, officially opening a space where all children would be welcome, regardless of their abilities or differences. As children rushed forward to explore the new equipment, I watched my daughter join them, laughing as she climbed onto a specially designed merry-go-round that could accommodate children with mobility devices alongside those without. In that moment, watching her joy, I knew we had truly found home. Not just a house in a neighborhood, but a community that had finally learned the true meaning of belonging.